right, I'm in Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11, I'll be in verses 5 and 6 in this message. In this message, I'll be talking about the testimony of Enoch, and in verse 5, and then in verse 6, I'll be spending some time talking about the subject of pleasing God. To begin with, though, it's important for me to review again verse 4, to spend a little bit more time in the subject of Cain and Abel, because it is relevant to the way that people will in general read into verse 5 and verse 6. And so it's necessary for me to address this because there is a popular view concerning the situation that took place between Cain and Abel, and that tends to have an effect on how people interpret other passages. So let me spend some time talking about that first. What happens is that a lot of people look at the situation with Cain and Abel, and they will say, well, the reason why God found Abel to be righteous, why he found Abel to be acceptable, was because he provided the correct sacrifice. That's how people view that. They say that Abel provided a blood offering, and because he did that, of the blood of an animal, that was the correct one. That was proper. That was what was expected and or required. And so Abel, what he did was he followed the directions of God correctly. And because he followed the directions of God correctly, God declared him to be righteous, and obviously he considered Abel to be acceptable, and he would, as a result, he would reward Abel. That's how most people are speaking about Genesis chapter 4 with regards to Cain and Abel. And as I explained in the previous message, that's not what was really going on. The directions that were given, if you wanted to look at this from the perspective of the directions, who followed the instructions of God correctly, then you'd have to consider Cain, because Cain had received the instructions through his father Adam that he would be expected to work the ground. That is where his food is going to come from. That was part of the curse of God on humanity because of the decision of Adam and Eve. Cain followed those directions. He did exactly what God told his father Adam that Adam would do and everybody else would have to do. You're going to have to work the ground. You're going to have to pull weeds. All right? And that's how you're going to get your food. So when Cain presented his offering of the produce from the ground, that was a demonstration of Cain following the directions, all right, following the instructions. And so Cain should have been declared righteous if you were to use that kind of criteria, because at no time did God declare that the instructions were, at a certain time, at an appointed time, you are to kill an animal, and it is the blood offering that is going to make the difference. God did not give those instructions to the people at this time. Now, through the sacrificial system, when the nation of Israel was established and the law was given through Moses, that certainly was presented. And that's what people are doing, is they're saying, well, because later on, that was how righteousness was somewhat established, because of that, then we're going to go retroactive and say that that's what was going on between Cain and Abel. But the sacrificial system made no one perfect, made no one righteous, according to the law of Moses. It didn't even happen through that. That was what was given as a way of covering over sins, but so that they would be remembered, so that they would be memorialized and remembered until the point in time in history when the Messiah would come and he would provide for the forgiveness of sins and take the sins of the world away. And at that point, the sins would no longer be remembered. All right? So, this is the common view that people have, that because Abel provided the right sacrifice because he fulfilled the requirements. He met the criteria. He followed the directions correctly, that was what it was about. And it just wasn't. The issue was, as I explained in the previous message, the issue was that Cain was trying to establish his right standing with God by his obedience. All right? That was the issue. He was trying to establish his right standing with God by his obedience. God established the rules, said this is the way it's going to be. You could look at that as a law. Thou shalt work the ground. Thou shalt pull weeds. That's how you're going to eat. You could look at it from that point of view. Cain fulfilled those obligations, and as a result, there should be compensation for what Cain did. And that was his attitude before God, that because I have done this, you should accept me. Because I have obeyed, you should accept me. Because I followed the directions and I did what was expected, I did what was required, I embraced the curse, I did. And so you owe me. And when God didn't pay up, all right, when God did not deliver on what Cain expected God to deliver, then he got upset. He got angry. And he engaged in murder. All right, he murdered his brother. He thought, okay, well, we have a problem now, don't we? The problem is that Abel is going to be accepted because he has a different attitude, because he offers what he has and what he did, and it's a representation of himself, and he's not offering this with the idea that he is obedient, because clearly Cain was more obedient than Abel. And so, this is a problem, all right? The problem is, from Cain's point of view, the problem would be that Abel was able to obtain his right standing before God outside of the instructions that God gave. Don't worry, Cain, he will fix this. He will just murder Abel. All right? When Abel is dead, no more problem. All right? Some people solve problems in life in that way. All right? That's just how some people are. In this case, this is what Cain did. So that's how he responded to the rejection of God. Okay, God rejected him. Cain said, okay, well, we'll do something about this. Yeah, this is a problem. Don't worry. I'll fix it. You like my brother better? Well, how about we kill him? We'll put him to death. I'll murder him. And then he's not around anymore. And then, I'm all that's left. And so you're just going to have to like me. That's an example of the way that some people think. I'm not suggesting that that's exactly what Cain was thinking, because I honestly have no way of knowing. But I'm using that as an example just to illustrate what was going on and to exaggerate the point a little bit, that the relationship that Cain was trying to have with God was on the basis of Cain doing what was established, doing what he thought was right, and then God would like him. God would find him to be acceptable. And that's how a lot of people want to live. All right? And in religion, all right, this is the way. You do what is right and God will like you. You don't do what is right and God will not like you. And that's how many people live their Christian life. They live according to the law. And it may not be the totality of the Mosaic law, but it's part of it. It's the ones that they like, the ones perhaps they find easier to obey, or the law of the church. The church will just define, this is what's right, this is what's wrong. We'll tell you what it is. We'll quote some scriptures in order to point it out, and then we have the definitive law. Just follow the law, follow the directions, and when you are obedient to God, He will bless you, and when you're not, He won't, and He may even curse you. And so be sensitive to this. And this is the way of life that a lot of people have. And so the story of Cain and Abel is used inappropriately. It's used inappropriately by saying that you just have to follow the right directions and you have to present the right offering. You have to do that correctly. And when you do that, you follow the right directions, and God will like you. And when you don't, then he won't. And this establishes a life of works, all right? A life of repentance, obedience, works, and then you receive blessings and rewards because God will owe you. God will effectively be indebted to you. And how are these blessings and rewards to be defined? What is it that you expect? What is it that you are looking for? And you ask people, all right? You ask people, and they will tell you. They will tell you the kinds of things that they would like to have. They would like to have some improvements in their life. And if you feel a little shy about asking people, why do you seek God? If you feel a little bit shy about that, because they're probably going to say something like, I seek God because I want my life to be improved, and I want it to be improved in a measurable way, and I'll probably measure it by the kinds of stuff that I have, or maybe even the quality relationships that I have because I have good people in my life, or because I have a lot of money in the bank. That's how people will want their lives to be. And if you don't want to ask them that kind of a question directly, just wait for them to complain. Wait for them to complain, or wait for them to be depressed about something. And you can and many of these things that they complain about as it comes to their relationship with God, or the things they might find depressing, is they may say something to the effect of, God is just not blessing my life in the way that I would like him to, that I think he should. And that becomes an expression of why people seek God. They seek God because they want their life to be different in these measurable physical ways. All right? And the system of law is appealing because when you do things, then he will in some ways kind of owe you. All right? Now, when it comes to Enoch is next. What it says is that Enoch walked with God, and he was pleasing to God, and he was pleasing because of his faith. All right? By faith, in verse 5, this is Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5. By faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and was not found, because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony, that he pleased God. And he pleased God by faith. And this is what people usually mean by this when they're thinking about a verse such as this, verse 5, the subject of faith. What people are usually thinking is that Enoch had faith in God, all right? And because of his faith, he did works. Just as James said, faith without works is dead. And so clearly, or at least this is what people think is clear, clearly Enoch did a lot of works. He did a lot of works as an expression of his faith. And because of that, he was pleasing to God. And look at the reward that God gave Enoch. This is what people are thinking. God gave Enoch this reward that he wouldn't see death, that he wouldn't die. That God would take him out before he experienced the suffering and the pain and the distress of physical death. That was his reward. That was how God compensated him or paid him for doing all these works in his life, which were a reflection or an expression of his faith. This is what people will generally believe concerning this. I do not see this interpretation here at all, mainly because you go all the way back to the beginning with regards to Cain and Abel, and I start there, And I see, from what I can tell in Genesis chapter 4, it's especially found in verse 7, which just simply is hard to identify because of the poor quality translations in English that we have. It's just unfortunate. But from what I see in Hebrew that it was written in, what I see is that God expressed to Cain that God was not pleased with Cain because Cain was trying to establish his right standing with God by his works. That was what it was about. Because Cain was suggesting, because I have done this, now I am right with you, you owe me, kind of a scenario, whereas Abel did not relate to God in that way. Okay, now let's consider Enoch a little bit more. Now, it does say that in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5, that he did not see death. That's what it says. But let's go back for a moment to Genesis chapter 5, where it speaks of Enoch. There really isn't a lot to read here about Enoch. I'm going to start in Genesis chapter 5, verse 21. And it says, Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. That's all it says. That's all we got. Right? It does not say that God ended Enoch's life, that he ended Enoch's life in the sense that Enoch did not see death before his life ended. It doesn't say explicit. It doesn't say here in Genesis chapter 5 that God spared him from experiencing death, physical death. It doesn't say that. But in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5, it kind of says that. It does. So I don't know where this came from. I don't know where this information came from. It is not found in Genesis chapter 5. And so there's two possibilities. The first possibility is that this is just simply the opinion or the extrapolation of the writer, the person who wrote this. He saw Genesis chapter 5 and he expressed his opinion that this is how it played out, that this is what happened. That Enoch did not see death. God took him out before he would go through the process of physical death. And that this is just the opinion of the writer. That's a possibility. Or it could be divine revelation. It could very well be that, where the Lord gave him divine insight, and so he recorded the divine insight that God expressed to him here in Hebrews chapter 11. And I don't have enough information to be able to determine exactly what happened. And to me, it really isn't that important, because let's assume that maybe Enoch would have experienced physical death. There are lots of ways that he could have died that would not have been terribly unpleasant. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that he would have encountered much suffering anyway. There are a lot of ways that this could have happened naturally, such that God did not need to extract him before experiencing that anyway. And so I personally don't think that this issue is that important. I don't see it that way. A lot of people do, but it's not something that is important to me. And so, I don't have a lot to say about that. For myself, there are other things here that are much more important. Okay, now, the first thing I would like to mention is how short this description is in Genesis chapter 5. And I'd like to read through this again and speak about this from the point of view of Moses, because Moses was in the tent of meeting, and he was receiving this information from God personally. God met with Moses in the tent of meeting, and the entire nation of Israel, all those people, were witnesses of the presence of God being there in the tabernacle and God meeting with Moses. Moses meeting with God. There were witnesses. About 250,000 people were witnesses to this event. And Moses was recording the things that God shared with him. And looking at Genesis chapter 5, I can have a little bit of an imagination concerning what this conversation may have looked like as God would have been speaking to Moses and saying, okay, Moses, we're going to write down Genesis, right? Or Bereshit, the first book. This is the history of what happened before your time. We're going to do this, and I'm going to tell you the things that I think are important about what should be recorded here. And, I was there. You weren't there. I was there. And I know what happened. And so I want you to write it down in this way. That, to me, is the proper way to read through Genesis, especially the early chapters, is to read through it from this perspective. And I can just imagine in chapter 5 when God would have been speaking about Enoch. And it might have sounded something like this, where God would have been talking with Moses and he would have said, Moses, there was this guy, this guy, his name was Enoch. And we walked together. And one day, I just decided to take him with me to heaven. That was it. And I can just, imagine him thinking about Enoch and maybe some of the conversations that they had and maybe some of the things that they did together. And not really talking about it with Moses, just reminiscing for just a moment. So Moses would take out his pen and he would say, well, how do I write that down? Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years. Now, it could be that he was not walking with God before Methuselah. And so God might have said, there's this guy named Enoch. And after he had his first son, his attitude really changed. He really wanted to get to know me. That was just a real pivotal moment for him. And so he could have written it that way. Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had sons and daughters, as he's writing down what God just told him. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. And, I can just imagine somebody asking Moses, after Moses wrote this, after maybe a few months or maybe even a year or so, and he brings this out to a few people and says, hey, look what God said to me. And people would ask him, well, gosh, Moses, what else did he say? And Moses would say, well, that's all he said. He was thinking about it, but he didn't say anything more, so I didn't put anything more down. It could very well have been as simple as that. All right? What I find important to see is that what this meant was that Enoch walked with God. What would that have meant to Enoch? To walk with God. What would that have meant? On a daily basis? Or just an occasional experience? How would Enoch define that? If you were to ask Enoch, what was it like to walk with God? What would he say? What would it mean to him to say that he walked with God? What would that mean? Would that mean that they actually went on little paths together? They walked together and they talked about how the weather was? They spotted a squirrel and they talked about, how the squirrel was behaving? Or the leaves were coming out on the trees, or the leaves were falling. What did that mean? Did that mean that Enoch walked with God in the sense that God allowed him to be a participant in some things that God was doing? Or was God walking with Enoch and being a participant in some of the things that Enoch was doing? And that they may have had some conversations about what was going on and about things that Enoch could learn and discover. What would that mean? We don't have enough to know what that would have meant to Enoch. And if it meant something definitive to Enoch, which I'm sure that it did, that does not mean that we have to have the same kind of relationship that Enoch had for us to say that we walk with God. We can walk with God in a different way. In fact, I would expect that we would, because the relationship that we have with our God, especially now, is an individual one. It is not a collective relationship. It is an individual relationship, one-on-one, person to person, with the living God. And so each one will have uniqueness, and everyone will have their own unique description of what it means to say that they walk with him. All right? Well, one of the things that we do know concerning faith is that faith is the response to the truth that is revealed. It is the response. It doesn't mean that we are performing works necessarily. It just means that the way that we live our lives, the way that we think, the way that we understand, the way that we comprehend, is a reflection of the truth that is revealed. The truth is revealed, and this becomes a part of our daily life in the sense of our decision making or our views of life and circumstances in life. Faith is the response to the truth. It's when we embrace the truth and we let that be an integral part of our living experience in this world, however that may look. Enoch believed God. And the way that he lived his life was a reflection, or there was a little bit of a reflection of what he believed. It was incorporated within the decisions that he made and within the life that he lived. That we can have confidence in, because that is what faith means and what faith represents. It doesn't require some definitive work of some kind. It just requires that we have that within our being, and that how we live our lives will be a reflection, that what we believe concerning what God has revealed will find its way in our lives in some respect. And so Enoch had faith in God, and he walked with God. And to me, that means that in his life, in some ways, he walked in his life with a response that included a response, an involvement, a participation from the truth that was revealed to him. But primarily, Enoch believed God. All right? Enoch believed him, and God found that pleasing. The relationship is not described as God blessed Enoch, God delivered anything to Enoch, God did any special miracles in Enoch's life. Says nothing about that at all. For God to be pleased with Enoch did not require, it will never require God to do any of those specific kinds of things that we would describe as blessings. All right? It does not require that. Just the fact that he's pleased. All right? With faith, by believing him, you will please him. And that's a big deal, because if you haven't noticed, it's very unusual to find someone who believes God. All right? It's very unusual. Check around, ask around. It's difficult to find people who genuinely believe him. If they do believe him, they may only believe a little, even maybe not too much. And so for God to find someone who even believes him is a big deal. And he finds that pleasing. What kind of a relationship would you like to have with other people? Would you like to have the kind of relationship that a lot of people are suggesting that we should have with God? A relationship such that a person is in your life and they believe that if they do certain things, maybe if they have a certain attitude, maybe if they talk a certain way, then you will bless them. Is that the kind of relationship you want? That because of what they do or don't do, and maybe even because of what they believe or think, or maybe they don't believe it, but they think it and they promote it anyway, that because of that, they expect you to intervene in their lives and deliver something to them. It's almost like compensation or payment. Is that the kind of relationship you would like? Right? No, you don't want to have that kind of a relationship. If you have one, it's not going to be long term, that's for sure. Eventually, you're going to get to a point where you get tired of this heavily unbalanced, unequal kind of relationship. It will begin to wear on you a little bit. All right, but this is what people are thinking. Or would you like to have a relationship with someone who believes what you have to say? Who, you express what you think, how you feel, what you see, what you understand. And a person in your life, a friend, they pay attention and they think about it and they say, I think you're right. All right, now we have to assume that you are. And God is always right. And so that's the example, is that God is always telling the truth. He's always expressing reality. And so for someone to believe him is a big deal. And just as you would find it pleasing to have someone in your life who believes you, especially when you tell the truth, who believes you, who considers that your feelings have some significance of some kind, that what you think has some measure of importance to them, this is the kind of relationship that you would like to have. Or would you rather have the kind of relationship where somebody just does whatever you think they should do and then you owe them a blessing in return? That is not the kind of relationship that God wants to have with us. He wants to have a genuine one, such that he expresses himself, we pay attention, we believe him, and he finds that pleasing. He does. All right? And so in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5, by faith Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony, that he pleased God. All right? That was his testimony. He testified of God because he was one of those who believed God. And so Enoch was by default a living testimony of the living God of the universe. And then God takes him out of there, takes his witness. Give that some thought. Consider the significance of God taking his witness out of the world, such that the world would have heard more of this God, would have maybe believed God because of the testimony of Enoch. But instead, God said, no, let's just come out of it. Come out of there. Come and be with me. All right, in verse 6, but without faith it is impossible to please him. Why? Because how are you going to please him if you don't believe him? All right, that's one of the hazards of living your life according to repentance and obedience. One of the hazards is that you will just do what is right, don't do what is evil, and you're going to think that you have some kind of a relationship with God. A lot of people believe this, just sort of by default, they have a relationship with God. But God does not find that to be pleasing at all. What he finds to be pleasing is that we believe him and that we trust him. And that without that faith, without that belief, and without that trust, without that, he's not pleased. You don't need to believe in God to follow the directions. You don't need to believe in God to follow the law. All right? You don't need to do that. Consider the Sadducees as an example. The Sadducees were a people during the time of the Lord Jesus who lived in accordance with the law, not because they had some expectation of eternal life, but because they felt that that was just a good way to live. All right? And they do that. And you will encounter people, if you will get out enough, you'll encounter some people who live their lives by a certain standard, and it may be a Christian standard, and yet they really have no interest in God at all. Their interest is, well, I just want to live a good life. All right, this can be done. You don't have to believe in God to live according to the law. You do not need to have a relationship with God to live according to the law. But in the end, what are you going to say to God? You owe me? You know, I was a pretty good person, especially when you compare me with these other people. That's not going to get anywhere. That's not going to go anywhere. He's not going to look at you in that way and say that, you know, your death, your end of life, what that means, and going into the presence of God and the kingdom of heaven, what that really is some kind of debt collection experience. That's how people relate to God, as if they're going to go to the kingdom of heaven and collect on all that he owes them because of all of their repentance and obedience. And he's going to be really pleased with that. That's really what's pleasing to him. I'll tell you, when he gets to see you and he gets to pay all of his debts to you, oh, he's going to be really pleased with that. You know, finally get it all paid off. All right. You probably would be very pleased if you considered a circumstance where you had a lot of debts that you owed, and then one day you managed to pay them all off. I'm sure you'd be feeling quite pleased about that, you know. And God is going to feel that too, because you're going to show up and he's going to finally settle the debts. That's how people will relate to him. And that's not what it's going to be like. It's just not going to be like that at all. Without faith, it is impossible to please him. Because that's what he's looking for. He's looking for people who will believe what he has revealed to them, and what he has revealed to them becomes an integral part of their living experience. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Verse 6, he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. All right, now this can be viewed from two different points of view. The first point of view of those living by the law. He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So those people who are diligently seeking him, they expect to be rewarded, you know? And again, how will they measure that? How will they measure the quality of their reward? Well, just wait until life gets hard, right? Oh, that's a wonderful time for a person to reflect on their relationship with God. And it usually looks like this. Life starts getting hard and they start complaining. You know, I have been diligently seeking God, and look what's going on in my life that's not like yours, you know. What's going on in mine? This is awful. This is terrible. This is stressful. This is disappointing. This is distressing. And yet I have been seeking God. Where's the reward? Right? Where's the reward? And they express that they have truly, totally missed the point. Okay? Missed the point. All right, how would you like it if a person seeks you out? They seek you out. They want to know you. They want to get to know you. They want to know all about your history, all about your past, everything. You know, and they want to be close to you, and they want to have conversations with you. Why? Well, one day they express that to you. Says, you know, I've been into your life. I've been in your life for a long time now, and so I expect to be rewarded for what I have done by being in your life, you know, having conversations with you and learning about you and walking with you. You know, you owe me, and I expect to be rewarded because I diligently sought you, and so you had better pay up. You know, if you had somebody in your life like that, how would that make you feel? You know, you think that's going to make God feel something different? You know, he's going to feel that way. He's going to think that's why you were in my life, because you eventually wanted to collect on your rewards. That's what this was about. You diligently sought me because of what I would eventually deliver. That's why you sought me, because of what you would eventually get from me, of these things, this stuff, these rewards, whatever that may look like. And that's not what he is doing. That is not what he is a part of. Okay, now should he want to share good things with people? Of course he does, and I don't want to take that away. But that's not what this verse is about. Those who diligently seek him, he will reward. All right, but it's not a reward in the sense of how you're going to measure your blessings or how he's going to make the delivery. If you're seeking him, eventually you should find him. Okay? And I know that might sound a little extra profound, so I'll say it again. If you are seeking him, then you hopefully will find him. But, people are seeking what he might be able to give. They're thinking, yeah, but I want one of his cows, or I want some of the treasures that he has. That's what I want. I'm really, people are saying that they're really seeking his stuff, and they expect to find his stuff, and they just kind of gloss it over and say, yeah, but I'm seeking God. No, you're not. You're seeking his stuff. He's got a lot of cows on various hills, and you want one of them. All right, that's how people are relating to him. No, folks, if you seek him, the expectation, the hope is that you will actually find him. And he will walk with you, and you will walk with him. And you'll have a relational experience such that you will grow to understand and discover, and you will hear the truth that he reveals to you, and you will believe what he reveals to you. So if you seek him, you will find him, you will have a relational experience, you will believe, you will have faith, all right? You will respond to that. It will be an integral part of your life. But what is the reward? He is the reward. All right? He is the reward. He is, if you are seeking after him, he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him because they will find him. He is the reward. Instead, people are thinking, yeah, but I want some of his stuff. Folks, he is the reward. He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him because they will find him. That's what it means. Again, verse 6, but without faith it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. He is a rewarder because they will find him, and that will be their reward. He is their reward. And when you know him, there is nothing greater than him. There is nothing that he can deliver. There is no stuff that can compare with the greatness and the magnitude of the person of your God. And if you think otherwise, it's only a way of saying that you just don't know him, and that you need to know him and know him more until you realize that I'm telling you the truth, that to know him and to have him is the reward. It truly is. Okay, from there into verse 7, we have the testimony of Noah. And then we'll speak of this in the next message. For those of you who are in some small groups, using this for your small groups, I do have a question for you guys to perhaps consider using as a means of initial discussion. What does it mean to you to walk with God? What does it mean to you to walk with God? Do you walk with God? What does that mean to you? All right, now your answer could be simple or complex, whatever it is. There is no right or wrong answer. Just to consider it and to think about that. And I would expect that over time your answer would likely change. As we grow and mature, what it means to walk with God to us could very well be quite different, especially as we go through changes in our own life experience. Our walk with him would be expected to be different in many ways. And so however you may consider answering that, I think it's a good question, and that it can facilitate some good discussion. For me, the idea of walking with God starts out with an acknowledgement of His presence. That what it means to me to walk with God is that I walk in my daily experience with an acknowledgement of His presence, and everything starts there, but it certainly doesn't end there, and that from there is a lot that I can say about what it means to walk with Him, but it's diverse, it's various. There are many different examples of how I might be able to express that. All right, and I'll continue in the next message. Thanks.